She said it in front of our accountant, not loudly, not cruelly, but with a precision that made it clear the words were not spontaneous. "You never put me first," she said, turning her head slightly, like she had rehearsed the line in a mirror. Her posture remained professional, composed, one hand still resting on the leather folder she always brought to strategy meetings, even when she had nothing in it. Our accountant, a mid-level partner with enough experience to know better than to react, glanced between us and scribbled a note that did not need to exist. The room fell into a silence that did not belong to paperwork. I folded my hands and asked evenly, "In what sense?" Her lips parted, then paused. She had expected deflection. She had not prepared for inquiry. That half-second of recalibration told me she had wanted the phrase to hang there unchallenged. "I mean," she said carefully, "your focus is always the business. You say it is for us, but it feels like it is for you. Like you are married to outcomes, not to me." There was a smile in her voice, one of those trained empathy expressions, gentle enough to seem composed, detached enough to signal that the argument had already happened in her mind and she had already won. I nodded slowly and turned back to the binder in front of me. "Let us finish the equity rollover before we shift into emotional diagnostics." She looked slightly to our accountant, seeking validation. He avoided her gaze and cleared his throat. "Right. We were reviewing the restructuring options on the mixed-use property. You both indicated last week you wanted to transfer managing authority temporarily to streamline approvals." "Yes," she said quickly. "That is right. I can handle that filing." I said nothing, because that was the moment it clicked. I had never agreed to give her managing authority. I had discussed temporary oversight for efficiency, signed nothing, committed to nothing. Yet she had stepped in as if the decision had already been documented. After the meeting, she moved with confidence. She thanked our accountant, made a light joke about needing to grab turmeric shots before her next call, and kissed me lightly on the cheek. Her breath smelled of vanilla lip balm. It reminded me of winter mornings that used to mean something. I watched her walk down the glass hallway toward the elevators, shoulders back, phone already in hand, smile already prepared. It would have been easy to dismiss, easy to call it a misunderstanding, but I had learned quietly that her tone was never accidental. At home that evening, she moved through the kitchen with orchestrated warmth. She opened a bottle of white I had not seen before and said it was a gift from one of the speakers at her last panel. I did not ask which speaker. And I said, "What did you mean today?" She poured slowly, the wine hitting the glass like an afterthought. "What do you mean?" I met her eyes. "That I never put you first." She gave a soft laugh that was designed to smooth over discomfort. It was not meant to be harsh, just honest. Honesty is a word people use when they are finished with you but not brave enough to say so plainly. I said nothing more, not because I was silenced, but because I had already begun listening for something different. That night while she showered, I went into the home office. Not to search, just to observe. Her laptop sat open on the desk, sleep light blinking softly. I tapped the spacebar. The screen unlocked. It should not have. She had started using a password a month ago. I had watched her type it. She had forgotten to re-enable it after a software update. The desktop was clean, but the print queue was not. 3 documents sat in the pending list. One had failed to process, corrupted file. I opened the preview. The first few lines were visible. LLC assignment transfer, Westbridge Holdings, temporary authority assignment, signatory validation required. I scrolled. My name was listed as the assigning partner. Her name was listed below it as new managing authority. The signature field had been filled with my name in a scanned image I had only ever used for digital approval of internal memos. She had extracted it from our archived internal system. She had pasted it into a legal document, and she had sent it to the printer without checking for errors. I copied the document to an encrypted drive. Then I opened the folder it had come from. Inside were 5 more files, all named with vague codes, all pointing to shell holding groups I had never authorized. One was called New Struct Quiet MGMT Strategy. Another, Personal Retitle Growth Alignment Plan. I opened the second. It was a property reassignment draft. My name had been used as the original grantor, but the new owner, a company I had never heard of, a name with no history in our records. I searched it. The LLC had been registered 4 weeks ago in Wyoming, known for its opacity. Registered agent, a compliance firm based in Cheyenne. The listed business address was a mail forwarding service. The document timestamp matched the day she had said she was attending a wellness strategy offsite. I printed nothing. I saved everything. And then I closed the laptop and let the screen go dark. She came into the office an hour later wearing a robe and holding 2 mugs of chamomile. "Long day," she said with a tired smile. "I thought we could wind down." I took the mug. "Thank you." She curled into the reading chair, legs tucked beneath her. "I feel like we are finally coming into alignment again. Do you feel that?" I looked at her and let a pause carry the weight of my answer. Then I said, "I feel something shifting." She smiled at that. "That is growth." I took a sip of tea and nodded slowly. "No," I thought to myself, "that is architecture." And she had no idea I had already started dismantling it, quietly, precisely, piece by forged piece. 2 days later, I initiated a controlled test. I met with our property counsel under the pretense of updating our escrow documents. Casual, procedural, nothing that would raise a flag. He had handled our filings for 3 years, meticulous, discreet, loyal to contract above all else. I handed him a packet of our standard forms, then asked a question I already knew the answer to. "Have you reviewed any new assignments on the Westbridge Holdings file in the past month?" He frowned slightly. "No, not recently. Should I have?" I pretended to check my notes. "I thought something may have come through. A confirmation request or signature validation." He leaned forward, puzzled now. "Nothing has crossed my desk for that file. If someone submitted anything under that name, it would have needed both your notarized signature and verified ID." "Why?" I folded the printout back into the folder. I was probably misreading an internal memo. That was enough. I did not need his suspicion. I needed his baseline, and now I had it. No legitimate reassignment had passed through him, which meant whatever my wife had attempted was unofficial and unrecorded. But it would not stay that way. Back at the house that evening, she was on a video call when I walked in. Her tone was bright, cheerful, the kind of enthusiastic professionalism she saved for new collaborators. I stood quietly outside the room, just long enough to hear her say the words that clarified everything. "With the new structure in place, we can run this through the alternate channel and route deliverables under shared assets. I will forward the registration confirmation later." She signed off moments later. When she emerged, she seemed energized. "They want me to consult on a capital deployment framework," she said, reaching for the fridge as if we were still on the same team. "Small scale for now, but it could scale, especially if I position it under the right umbrella." I kept my expression neutral. "Which umbrella?" She glanced at me, eyes quick. "I will loop you in if it formalizes. For now, I want to keep it clean, just an exploratory connection." That phrase, "keep it clean," settled into my mind like a code. It was something people said when they wanted to hide the mess they had already started. Later that night, I checked the metadata on the corrupted document she had accidentally left in the print queue. Last modified, Tuesday, 9:17 p.m. That was the night she said she had gone to a peer mentorship dinner. I remembered because she had come home with a small bouquet of flowers, claimed it was a thank you gift from a speaker. She had placed them on the entry table and kissed me with a warmth that had felt studied. Now I knew it had been. The next morning I returned to our shared project server. She had not logged out. Her folder structure was messy, but the tags told a story. One subfolder, buried under 3 layers, was titled Foundry North Strategy Drafts. Inside were PDFs, images, call notes. The header on one of the documents read, "Provisional Asset Realignment Proposal under Discretionary Proxy." My name was on the footer, not as creator, as consenting partner. The partner field listed a new entity, Stonewell Strategic Partners, LLC. I had never heard of it. A reverse search confirmed it was real, registered in Delaware. Manager listed as Clara M. Jennings, a pseudonym she had used years ago for early branding tests when she was unsure about launching under her legal name. She had created a company under that alias, then listed herself as the manager. The email contact, an alternate Gmail account tied to a number I had seen once before, on a calendar entry marked only compliance call solo. I leaned back in my chair, hands still, breathing measured. This was not drift. This was deliberate repositioning. She was assigning value to herself that had been built jointly, then rebranding the origin as singular. And she believed I would never notice, or if I did, that I would let it go for the sake of peace. But peace is not the absence of harm. It is the presence of truth, and she had just stepped outside it. That evening, we had dinner at a small place near the waterfront. She had suggested it, said we needed simple space, which I took to mean a quiet environment where she could rehearse sincerity without interruption. She wore soft tones, brought her voice down by half a register. She reached for my hand across the table and said, "I feel like we are getting back in rhythm." I let her hold my hand. "What made you say that?" Her smile was practiced but not unkind. "You seem more open, like you are trusting me again." I did not correct her, letting her believe that was part of the strategy, because trust is not something I give lightly anymore. It is something I audit, and her audit had already failed. She reached for her wine. "I want to make sure you feel seen. I know that has not always been the case." I nodded once. "I do feel seen, just not in the way she meant." Later that night, after she fell asleep, I returned to my office, opened a secure folder, compiled everything: the corrupted document, the shell company records, the metadata trail, her call notes, her print logs, and then I added something else: a recording. She had left her video call app open. I had enabled the screen recorder quietly while she stepped away during a refill break. It captured 12 minutes of conversation, enough to confirm the identity of the man on the other end: a compliance attorney, mid-level, worked with a boutique legal firm specializing in small-cap asset transfers and private equity documentation. His name was listed on the founding documents of Stonewell Strategic Partners, and his laptop had been used to draft the unauthorized digital signature on the Westbridge Holdings reassignment. He had not just advised her, he had directly contributed to the document's creation. I sat with that for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because it changed the category of what I was dealing with. It was no longer about emotion. It was no longer personal. It was procedural. And I knew exactly how to respond to that. 3 days later, I met with a private forensic analyst. He had worked previously for a client who had been blindsided by a co-founder trying to dissolve a company beneath the radar. Quiet, efficient, immune to drama. I handed him the USB drive containing the corrupted document and metadata log. He scrolled through it without commentary, pausing only once, when he reached the screen recording of her video call with the compliance attorney. "This signature field," he said, tapping the monitor, "is lifted from a public template file, but the insertion data points to a local machine, an HP Elite model with a specific device path." "Can you trace that?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Already have. This timestamp matches a prior incident I handled 6 months ago. Same machine signature. Belongs to a legal contractor named Mason T. Works under a boutique firm out of Midtown. Has a reputation for handling low-visibility restructuring requests. But this crosses a line." I asked. "Is this a falsified signature?" He looked me directly in the eye. "Yes, and verifiable." I left with a signed audit and a chain of custody report. Back at the house, she was in the kitchen, barefoot, scrolling through her phone and humming under her breath. There was a plate of sliced fruit between us: mango, figs, raspberries. Her attempt at intimacy through habit. She looked up as I entered. "Look focused," I said. "Productive day." She nodded as if that were an answer. "I got an email about a new portfolio conference. They are looking for guest strategists. I might submit an abstract." I poured a glass of water. "Under what name?" She paused. "What do you mean? Which entity?" I asked, not looking up. She smiled, but it was a guarded one. "I have been exploring options. Diversification is not a betrayal." I met her gaze. "Only if it is not hidden." She tilted her head. "I have not hidden anything." That lie barely cleared her lips before the weight of it settled between us. I said nothing more. That was the most strategic move I could make in that moment, because silence does not accuse, it waits. And when it waits long enough, it makes the liar start talking just to fill the air. But I gave her no air to fill. That night, I wrote a memorandum of record and submitted it to my attorney. It outlined the discovery timeline, included the chain of custody file, and cited the partnership contract clause that required mutual consent for any transfer of authority on Westbridge Holdings. It also included a directive: File an immediate injunction against any attempt to transfer managing control of Westbridge without direct sign-off from both parties, retroactive to the document's creation date. The next morning, my wife received a letter from my attorney's office. She opened it over breakfast. Her expression changed halfway through the first page. By the second page, she folded it quietly and placed it on the table beside her juice. I let her be the first to speak. "This is a misunderstanding." I took a bite of toast. "Is it?" Her jaw tightened. "You could have talked to me before doing this." I met her eyes. "You could have asked for my signature before copying it." She flinched at that, not visibly, not dramatically. Just a flick of muscle near the temple, like her body realized before her mouth did that the game had shifted. "I was going to tell you." "No," I said calmly, "you were going to use it." Her hands remained on the table, still, unmoving, not in submission, in containment. "I had reasons," she said quietly. "You have not been fully engaged." I set my fork down. "That is not a justification, that is a rehearsal." She looked away. "You think this was malicious?" "I think it was strategic," I said. "And you chose your strategy over transparency." She stood then, walked to the sink, and began rinsing her plate. I stayed seated, watching. She turned after a moment. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "This is not about hate, this is about truth." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No more words came, because she understood finally that she had not been outmaneuvered in anger. She had been outmaneuvered in silence, and her next move was no longer hers to define. She did not sleep in our bedroom that night. There was no scene, no slammed doors, no emotional script. Just quiet movements after dinner, her laptop folded, her wine glass rinsed, her pillow relocated to the guest room without explanation. She was not hiding. She was recalibrating, and I allowed her the illusion of space because I had already secured the ground beneath us. By noon the next day, my attorney confirmed the injunction had been received and logged with the registry. It froze all asset-related decision rights on Westbridge Holdings until further court evaluation. That afternoon, she returned from a branding check-in at a downtown firm. She walked in wearing the navy blazer she always chose when she wanted to seem decisive. Her steps were confident, but her eyes kept darting to the stack of envelopes on the entry table. The letter from my attorney sat on top, unopened by her but clearly moved. She hovered there a moment before speaking. "You are escalating this too far." I set my phone down on the counter. "Am I?" She did not answer the question directly. "You know what you are doing will damage more than just me." I let the silence stretch before I spoke. "I know exactly what it will protect." She looked away then, jaw tight. "You used to care about how we looked to others. That was before you altered how we looked on paper." That ended the conversation. She stepped into the hallway, paused near the guest room, then closed the door behind her. Not loudly, just fully. The following morning, I received a call from a senior partner at Mason T's firm, the attorney she had worked with. His tone was professional, concerned, not confrontational. "There appears to be a document under your name," he said carefully, "submitted in error by one of our outside consultants. It has come to our attention through a third-party audit." I kept my voice level. "I have already filed a response through my legal team." A pause. "We are investigating the incident internally. I assure you we take digital signature use extremely seriously." "Good," I said. "So do I." The call ended quickly. It was clear they were trying to contain the damage. Later that evening she approached me in the living room. No whine, no soft voice. "There was no intent to mislead you." I looked at her steadily. "You attached my name to a document that shifted ownership without my consent." "I needed leverage," she said. "Everything we built is weighted toward you. Your name, your leadership, your decisions. I just wanted room to lead something." "Then you should have built something new, not tried to rebrand what we already owned." Her voice dropped. "You always assumed you would make the decisions. You left me no room." "That is not true," I said calmly. "I left room for collaboration, not for quiet replacement." She took a breath, but the air she pulled in was thin. "I thought if I asked," she said, "you would say no. Then you never trusted me to begin with." That stopped her. And for the first time she did not have a reply, not because she had nothing to say, because she realized that in chasing her own freedom she had rewritten the history of what we were building, and assumed I would not notice the edit. The next morning, a notification appeared in my inbox. A legal memo from Mason T's firm. They had formally ended his professional involvement. An internal audit had confirmed use of a client's digital assets without proper verification. They accepted accountability for the breach, issued a formal apology, and agreed to cooperate with any further review. I read the email 3 times, not for satisfaction, for confirmation. This was no longer her story to control. It was a record now, and records are not emotional. They are structured. They are time-stamped. They are verifiable. 2 days passed with polite distance. She made coffee in the mornings, placed it on the counter without speaking, then disappeared into back-to-back virtual sessions labeled as strategy co-creations. I no longer asked who was on the other end. I already knew the answer: she would never volunteer. By Wednesday, the tone in the house had shifted. She no longer floated trial gestures of reconciliation. No more shared playlists or leftover pastries from her favorite cafe. She had stopped performing stability because the curtain had already dropped, and I had already rewritten the script. That afternoon, a new notification came through from my legal counsel. A second filing had been triggered, this time connected to a separate property we jointly held through a shared trust. The trust paperwork, long untouched, had recently been accessed and updated under a new administrative email address linked to Stonewell Strategic Partners. She had used her shell company to file an amendment assigning herself operational authority during inactivity of co-trustee. Except I was not inactive, and now the system had logged the conflict. I documented the timeline and submitted the sequence for review. My attorney confirmed the amendment had no standing. It violated the original trust's dual signer clause, but the attempt was recorded, and that was the point. It was not about outcome. It was about intent. That evening I brought it up not with confrontation but with precision. I found her in the home office, reviewing presentation slides on her second monitor. She was adjusting font weights, aligning brand statements. The slides were branded Stonewell. "You made another move," I said from the doorway. She turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "The trust. You filed an amendment using your company as a proxy." She stayed still. "It was a draft, a template. I never finalized it." "You filed it with the registry." She hesitated. "I was testing options." I stepped into the room but did not sit. "That option is no longer on the table. The trust is under audit. Any further changes will trigger immediate review." She watched me quietly, her expression flickering between frustration and calculation. "You are burning this down." "No," I said. "I am documenting the matches." She stood then, carefully, as if afraid of tipping the balance further. "I do not want this to get ugly." "It already has," I said. "You just wanted it to stay quiet." She moved to leave the room but stopped at the door. "I felt like I was always in your shadow." "You were not," I said. "You just stopped building alongside me." She walked out without another word. I remained there for a while, staring at the monitor still displaying her slides. One of the taglines read, "Legacy begins where limitation ends." The phrase was not hers. It had come from a keynote I gave 3 years ago. She had typed it into her notes that day, smiling from the front row. Now it was framed as an origin story for something she had tried to build without me. The next morning, I submitted a separate request to the Oversight Board for our joint business holdings. I attached a compiled summary of actions taken under Stonewell without prior disclosure or partner approval. It included 3 document screenshots, 1 recording transcript, and the confirmed removal of her legal advisor from his firm's active roster. The board responded with a standard clause trigger, temporary suspension of her voting rights until full compliance review. Her influence, quietly and officially, was gone. That night she did not speak during dinner, but I did. "You said I never put you first," I said, my voice steady. "But that was never true. You just stopped putting us in the equation." She placed her fork down gently, hands folded. "I wanted more control. And now," I said, "you have less than ever." There was no reply because she understood now. Control is not seized, it is granted, and she had misused every ounce of it I had ever given her. She began packing quietly, not out of defiance or declaration. It was procedural now. A traveler collecting necessities, not a woman escaping fire. She folded clothes with the precision of someone who needed the act to feel productive, if not redemptive. She did not ask for help. She did not offer timelines. By the end of that Friday, 2 suitcases sat near the door. That night she stood by the stairs for a long time, one hand on the railing, her body facing upward but her attention still tethered to the room. "I will come back for the rest," she said. I nodded. "Let me know what needs forwarding." She hesitated. "Do you want me to keep you updated?" I looked up from the legal brief I had been reviewing. "About what?" "Anything," she said. "The properties, the next steps, where I land." I folded the document closed and placed it beside me. "You chose to operate independently. I trust you will continue that pattern." Her shoulders dipped slightly, not from pain, more from recognition. There would be no shared follow-up, no co-authored version of this ending. Only records, legal structures, enforceable boundaries. She stepped out the front door without looking back. I did not watch her go. I spent that weekend finalizing the binders. One for the financial audit, one for compliance history, one for the shell company filings, including the trust amendment she had tried to slide into place. Everything was cataloged, time-stamped, signed where needed. By Monday, I submitted the full package to our advisory board with a brief, formal statement, reaffirming sole operational oversight pending standard dissolution review. There was no fanfare, no counterclaim, only silence, until the following Thursday. A colleague from the local investment circle forwarded a message, a quietly distributed email announcing the dissolution of a planned venture under the Stonewell umbrella. No formal apology. Just a withdrawal of interest, citing internal misalignment and asset security concerns. 2 hours later, another investor pulled out. This one had supported her earlier branding push. His brief public statement read, "Pending clarification of contribution origins, we are suspending engagement." The unraveling had begun, not because I pursued it, but because I had documented the truth, and truth has a way of outlasting strategy. That evening I returned home early and sat in the office we once shared. Her chair was empty, her whiteboard had been wiped clean, but the faint outline of her last diagram remained, 4 circles connected by arrows labeled intent, right arrow power, right arrow legacy, right arrow alignment. I erased them with a damp cloth, not in anger, not with sadness, just clarity. The following morning I found an envelope on the doorstep, no return address. Inside was a single piece of stationery with her handwriting. "I did not think you would find everything, but you did. I thought I could balance both stories. I was wrong." That was the closest she would come to an admission. It was enough. I placed the letter in the back of the compliance binder, not as evidence but as context, because someday I may be asked how it ended, and I will answer without pride or bitterness. It ended the moment she thought she could reassign what we built without accountability. She attempted to salvage her narrative one final time. 2 weeks after her departure, I received a call from a former mutual colleague, someone who had once praised her as grounded and brilliant. He had received a carefully crafted message from her, a soft admission, a layered retelling of our separation framed as a divergence in values. "She said you were emotionally distant, that you shut down when she tried to grow," he told me cautiously, unsure of which version to believe. I gave him the same answer I had given to everyone else. There is a difference between growing apart and staging a reallocation of trust. He did not press. By then, most people had started to understand what had really happened. The story she wanted to tell unraveled in silence, not through confrontation, but through the paper trail she never expected me to assemble. Once the legal filings became visible, once her signature appeared on too many documents with too many inconsistencies, the illusion began to erode. Her advisor never resurfaced. The firm that had previously hosted her branding sessions removed all affiliate content from their digital archives. They issued no public statement. They did not need to. Within a month, Stonewell Strategic Partners was quietly dissolved. The name vanished from partnership directories. The social handles were abandoned. The website went offline, and with it the story she had tried to script, a new identity built on reassigned foundations, disappeared. The few friends who remained loyal to her never contacted me. The ones who had doubts sent short, indirect messages. One simply read, "I did not realize how much you were holding together." I replied with nothing, because acknowledgement once delayed does not require reception. At home, the atmosphere changed, not lighter, not instantly better, just clearer. I removed the second desk from the office, not as a statement, only as a correction to the architecture. There was no longer a shared purpose to house. I kept working, quietly, steadily. The advisory board reconfirmed full operational control. The asset reviews passed without issue. I moved forward without ceremony. Some nights I still passed the guest room and glanced inside, not out of nostalgia, just habit. The travel bag she had left behind was gone. No note, no request for retrieval. Just absence. And absence, once clarified, does not haunt, it makes space. One morning I received a final email. No subject line, no greeting, just this: I misunderstood what partnership meant. I mistook ambition for entitlement. I am sorry. There was no signature. I archived it without reply, because by then she had already watched herself come last, not through punishment, not through vengeance, through exposure, through evidence. Through a sequence of decisions that began with a lie she thought would stay invisible, and ended with the one thing she never expected: me putting the truth first, before her, before us, and finally for myself.